The point is that it was a sacrifice that we made, walillahi alhamd. And what led to all of this, brothers and sisters, is I remember when I really thought about seeking knowledge and wanting to change, because this is something that never existed in my community. Of course, as we say, not when I was young, because I'm still young, but when I was younger, we had no role models. We did not have, English-speaking imams. We did not have English-speaking imams. We did not have a person to go back to, a person to ask. So, of course, seeing this in my community, seeing my community going astray one after one, and I was amongst those people, I felt that there's something that needs to be done. Then I began to read about seeking knowledge. And this is what led me personally in seeking this path. And I wrote a few points down. These are points that I just remembered as I was coming in, points that I always remembered when looking up, the question that I had. What takes a person to become a sheikh? And these are the points that led me to seeking knowledge. This is what made me interested in seeking knowledge. The first point that I read was ikhlas. You have to have sincerity. So it hit me right there, knowing that you could not succeed as a student of knowledge if you do not have sincerity, especially as a alim. Because sometimes you do become a doctor to be a successful person in this dunya. So you're dealing with people's bodies, basically, their physical appearance, but an alim is difficult. Alim is different. You're dealing with people's hearts. So you must be sincere. You must be sincere. So that's one of the points that hit me, and basically so for an example, if you speak to a doctor saying, how can I become a doctor? They don't say you have to be sincere. They say, you have to be focused. You have to make sure you have to work hard. I I never hear a doctor say you must be sincere. You must have sincerity in becoming a doctor. So basically, in my view, that gave it a very high value, when the first point was ikhlas. The second point that I really loved, and it made me attracted to seeking Islamic knowledge, is that the second point that I remember that I read was hubbul i'ana. You must love to help other people. As an imam, if you could not sacrifice your life in helping other people, for example, accepting their phone calls, answering their emails, opening the doors of your house. For example, all of you, alhamdulillah, you have your family, but as an imam, you have people that just pass by and decide to sleep over your house. They were traveling. I might have people that might come from New York and they sleep in my house for a week. You get it? And I must welcome them in my house, and fa'lan, I do, they're more than welcome to sit down. They could go on for a week or two. So hubbul i'ana was one of the conditions of seeking knowledge. You must love helping other people. If you can't, as an imam, you could never succeed. You can never succeed. The third point that I really loved is, and these are the points that I still remember. And this is 10 years ago. This is more than, not even 10 years. More than 10 years ago when I read these points. The third point was as-sabr. You have to have patience. You have to have patience. And of course this, reminded me of the patience that the Prophet ﷺ had. The other point that I really loved was a-ruhaniyya. You must be spiritual. And of course, to me that was amazing. I never heard of something called spirituality. That you have to be spiritual. You have to strengthen your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's other points, but the last one is al-akhlaq. You must have good manners, good ethics, good morals. So, inshallah, I'm just 5 more minutes, I'm going to tell you basically what I did as a student of knowledge. And don't think me saying this that I consider myself as a scholar. I still consider myself as a student. So, what you do as a sheikh, and of course, the imam is taken from the word amma ya'um, so basically standing in the position of leadership. So, I decided to go back to Yemen, and that's where I seek knowledge. So I remember I got to the university, and this university is one of basically the top universities in the Middle East, so it's very difficult to graduate from this university. And I was one of the first outsiders from Yemen to graduate from this university. So I remember I got to Yemen, and I went to the principal's office. You know how when you begin to become religious, you have people that grow their beard a little, and you don't know how to trim it, you don't know how to fix it, it's just you cut from here. You're not used to having a beard. We used to just go into the barber, getting our lineup, or shaving it off. Back then the style was having a goatee. So everyone had their goatees, and so it was basically just shave it off and fix yourself and go out. So I remember I got to the university, And they tell you this once you begin the path of becoming imam. The first year you're the biggest scholar in the world. They call you a mufti. The second year they call you a alim, which is a lower level than a mufti. A mufti is a person that gives out his own opinions. Then they say the third year you're a student, and the fourth year you're an ignorant person. You get it? Because then you begin to know who you are. First of all, you're so into it. So I remember I went to the university, and I was so excited, and I spoke to the principal. And people might think this is mean, but alhamdulillah, I got to know the principal later on, where my principal himself and slept in my house, and we were close friends, alhamdulillah, even though he was an older man. So I remember I got to the university, I said I want to become a sheikh. And to let you know, I never knew how to speak Arabic. I never know how to speak Arabic. And so the sheikh said, "Kalam Arabi, do you understand Arabic?" I said, Baba, Mama, the words that I think all of us know. And I remember the first thing he told me, and I never forgot this till today. He said, "Go learn and come back." Basically, he dissed me out, just right there. So then I remembered the word sabr. You have to have patience. And I remember the word akhlaq. You have to have manners. You can't speak back to your principal. So then he told me you have to take an Arabic class, which was 3 years, a 3-year program. Because you can't come in not knowing how to speak English. So alhamdulillah, I took that program in a year and a few months. So it was a 3-year program, I took it in 1 year and a few months. So alhamdulillah, then I finished the Arabic course where I began to speak the Arabic language. And alhamdulillah, in the year 2000, basically 3 years from that incident, I got a certificate from the government as being one of the best outspoken in the Arabic language in the country. Alhamdulillah, from the graduates. So alhamdulillah, this out really helped me out, being dissed out. So then I went back to the university in a year and a few months, and he said, "Do you speak Arabic?" And I spoke to him in Arabic. And I was very fluent, alhamdulillah. From nothing to something was very exciting. So alhamdulillah, then I began to speak Arabic. Then I started the first year of college or university. Of course, as an imam, people these days only understand fiqh. This is the very dangerous part of when it comes to this deen, not having the deeper understanding. So there's something in Islam called fiqh, and there's another thing in Islam that's called usul al-fiqh, Islamic law. So you don't understand the basics of the principles of fiqh, usul al-fiqh, the foundation, you cannot give fatwa. That's why you have a lot of people that just begin to speak in fiqh, not understanding usul al-fiqh, which is the foundation of fiqh. So they begin to make a lot of mistakes. So one of the things that we have to learn in our university is that you have to learn usul al-fiqh, then you learn fiqh. And one other thing, there's of course other subjects that we learned, alhamdulillah. One of them was hadith. So in 1 year we had to memorize more than 600 to 700 ahadith. So you had to memorize all the ahadith by heart. And of course the teacher then asks you, it's a verbal exam where he says, "Finish this hadith off." And you have to repeat the whole hadith. If not, then you have to write the whole hadith down. So you have more than 4,000 to 5,000 hadith that we had to memorize in the 8 years of studying. And also one of the topics that they taught us was usul al-da'wah, how to convey the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was also important. Inshallah, I will just finish off with a few points, and this is something that all of us could do, is that right when I started the university, they gave us a 40-day camp. And subhanAllah, this 40-day camp is a camp that I never forget, until today. This 40-day camp was a spiritual camp, where you listen to spiritual lectures from the morning till the evening. And of course, to me, that was never understood. Beginning a university, and they say, okay, for 40 days, you're not going to learn nothing. You're not going to learn nothing. You just have to be spiritual. So you wake up after Fajr, you read Quran till sunrise, then you do the tasabih, then you go back to sleep, then you go listen to a spiritual lecture. It has nothing to, there's no new information. They're not educational speeches or lectures, nothing. And that went on for 40 days. You pray half of the night. You have to train yourself how to pray half of the night. And you train yourself how to read 1 juz a day. You train yourself. And that went on for 40 days. And subhanAllah, what I got from that is that you can never become an imam if you are not spiritual. if you do not take care of your own self, if you do not fix your mistakes, if you do not repent to Allah yourself, if you do not change yourself before changing other people. And I guess that was the path of the mashayikh. The last point is, why do people distance themselves from mashayikh today? I think one of the biggest diseases is because we have mashayikh that never learned under mashayikh. One of the things that we learn when seeking knowledge is that you respect your scholars. You respect your scholars. And it's a fact. It's a fact that the way you deal with your teachers is the way people will deal with you in the future. I'll finish off with the story. Where there was a big alim. He's one of the biggest living scholars now. His name is Abdul Karim Zaidan. Who heard of this sheikh? Dr. Abdul Karim Zaidan. He was my teacher for 8 years. He's a very old man. Very old man. He's basically in his 90s. He can't see anymore. And subhanAllah, this guy, this sheikh, teaches his books without looking at the book. And of course, he was given many prizes. He was given certificates. He was given basically honors from different countries. And he's a great scholar that, of course, he was exiled from Iraq and he stayed in Yemen for the rest of his life. So now he's in Yemen. I remember the scholar, and I never forget this. As I said, these are one of the things that we learn in seeking Islamic knowledge, that you must be respectful, especially to your teachers. And this sheikh, as I said, was an old man, and he couldn't see, so he'll wear those big, old-fashioned sunglasses. And of course, you think that he's seeing you or something, but he can't see nothing. But he teaches his book, wallahi, point by point. He taught us more than 10 books. And he doesn't even look at the book. And I remember and just this person, just one man, as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught me a lesson. I remember we had, in Yemen, we'll have 1,000 people in one class. So my classmates were 1,000 people, or if not more. 1,200, 1,300. So I remember we had big windows, huge windows. And as the sheikh comes in, the guy walks around the chairs, he sees who's absent, who's in class. So the moment that guy leaves, people jump out of the window. Of course, it's just right, they just jump out and they go back to their rooms and they sleep, and they skip the sheikh's class. And I remember, subhanAllah, I looked at someone's face. It's just a positive, and I never, even though I had 1,000 classmates, I knew that there was tens of people that will do the same thing. But there was one person that I just looked at his face, even though this is something that will happen every day. So right when that happens, people, it's something that we're used to seeing. But there was a person that just got me, and I just looked at his face and said, oh. But alhamdulillah, I never did that. And I would always walk behind the sheikh and carry his shoes. He doesn't know who's carrying his shoes anyways. He can't even see. So I would carry his shoes, I would give him water, just to get the ajr. Years passed by when I graduated, alhamdulillah. After 8 years, I graduated from the university, and I came back to America, and I stayed in America. And I go back to visit this university after a few years. And I get to the office, I see the principal, the same principal, of course, the one that told me I'm not accepted in the university. He was the same guy that told me to give a speech in the university. So I went to the next office, and they told me to wait in the office because he had people. So I got to the next office and I sat down, and students came in and they were yelling at a person. First, I just came in, just doing things. I wasn't even focused on the people that were sitting in front of me. But then students came and they said, "Ya akhi, come on, you're the meanest, you don't know nothing." They were yelling at a person, and Allah is my witness. And I said, these kids are so disrespectful. We never did that as students. We would always come to the principal's office and honor the principal, or even his secretary. But now students are just coming in, throwing the papers at the secretary. Like, "Get out of here! I want my grades. You have to change all the problems." Especially back home, very harsh people. And subhanAllah, I looked at his face. I looked at the secretary's face, and it was the same person that I seen running out the windows. Wallahi, basically, that hit me. I was like, subhanAllah, kama tadinu tudan. The way you treat people with disrespect, and they will come where people will disrespect you. So I guess that was something that I carried on with seeking knowledge, and it just goes on and on. But may Allah accept from us all. This does not make us, seeking knowledge does not make us scholars, but it just makes us students of knowledge. And a person that fears Allah when having this knowledge is a very successful person, and a person that shows this knowledge off for the sake of people, surely he will lose in this world and in hereafter.
Thank you so much, Sheikh. That was a great talk. And next I'd like to welcome Professor Saeed Khan, Professor of Middle Eastern Studies from Wayne State. And we also have our guest with us that we'd like to welcome to the panel, State Representative from Canton, Diane Slavens. And also her husband, Judge Mark Slavens. Please welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I say this with no sense of guile, and I say this with no sense of sarcasm. Thank you for coming. I know that for organizers of events, it's not easy to look out and see just one row or two rows or staggered rows of people, but you probably represent 1 out of every 30,000 Muslims in the Metro Detroit area. And so if you want to know what part of the problem is, just for 5 seconds, look behind you. Just take a look. Not at you. I mean, you're cool. This is the challenge, above all, that's facing a community, and it's part of a broader disease that it's not limited to the Muslim community. It's actually something that's endemic in society already, and that is a sense of apathy, a sense of ambivalence, a sense that there's something better to be done than this. And I'm very glad to see that you are defying that. That alone puts you well ahead of the game. So again, thank you for that. I've been asked to speak about how to be active and be an academic at the same time. It's not actually that difficult to do. Let me just get a show of hands. How many of you are still in high school? And how many of you started college? Okay. How far along? Just started?
Senior.
Senior? Okay. Junior? Where?
Wayne State.
How come I haven't seen you around, bro?
No, I've actually been to the 3-year lectures too.
Yeah, but you haven't ever registered for a class.
No, I've been to the ones that where you give them like speeches.
Oh, you mean the free ones?
Yeah.
So that was great. Right. All right. I don't know what you've heard, but okay. Let me go ahead and just, at the risk of boring you, but I think it is germane, let me give you a little bit of my autobiography, because I think it's helpful. I am everything that your parents say to avoid. All right? For those of you who think that a particular career will guarantee you getting married, or conversely, certain careers will not get you married, certain careers will not get you a BMW, certain careers will not get you respect or prestige or whatever it is, I'm here to prove to you that that's all balderdash. In my undergraduate, my major was, ready for this? Medieval literature. Okay. So if you want to go ahead and get into a real verbal battle over a Chaucer, you better man up and woman up. But I was also pre-med, got into medical school, and, wait for it, said no. Okay, that's strike one. I went to law school, practiced for a decade, with all due respect, Your Honor, and then walked away from that because I got bored. I figured, and I know this may be hard to believe, but I figured the world can deal with one fewer lawyer out there. 9/11 was a wake-up call for me. It really was a wake-up call because I looked out there and I saw that there was this urgent need to engage, to plug in. I know many of you are children of the 9/11 legacy, so you know what I'm talking about. And I think that there was probably always a bit of a twitch and an itch within me to do something else and to explore the more intellectual side. And I had a really good opportunity and some really good advice and some wonderful support to say, if you want to do this, go ahead. So I walked away from 2 out of the 3 accepted careers in the community. I guess the third would be engineering. I've never really had much patience for that. I did fix my toilet though last week by myself. I still had to call a plumber. was able to get into a master's program in Near East Studies, and then I was able to work toward my PhD in history. And I've been teaching at Wayne State now for 8 years. And between my air miles and the visibility and the ability to plug in, there is no regret whatsoever about doing it. Now, is it unconventional? Absolutely. Do I recommend everybody to do it this way? No, of course not. But there's a few lessons that I really learned, and somebody asked me just the other day, that what do you think really brings to the fore how you can do this? And there's really 3 things, and they all end with an ion for you science majors. There's your intention, and we've heard about that before. There's vision, and there's passion. And these three things cannot be taught. These are things you have to cultivate yourself. So we can talk about this a little bit more. What I think it also shows, though, is that it's okay if you don't have your entire life already scripted for you, either by yourself or by a parent or somebody else. And how many of you have no idea, those of you who still in high school, what you want to do in your life? You're awesome. And more importantly, because it's very important for you to feel bold enough to raise your hands. I remember when I was way back then in undergrad, the kiss of death was to say that you're an undeclared major. People just didn't know what to do with you. You were some kind of a mutant. How can you not know? How can you not know the day you got your high school diploma that you don't know what you want to do, especially in the Muslim community? You'll never get married. You'll never amount to anything. This was really the L word, loser manifest. It's okay. And the reason why is because that world out there is so fluid. When I was in high school, and even when I was in college, there was such a thing called the Soviet Empire. It doesn't exist anymore. And all these people were running out, chasing windmills, trying to figure out the Cold War, figuring out the Soviet Union. Many of them were so locked into one paradigm that they couldn't adjust when the Soviet Union collapsed. And some people in government also aren't doing much better. They're still using the old script in Washington. It was a time when the Japanese were also big investors. For all of you who know about China today, well, back then it was Japan. And I know a lot of my friends decided that they wanted to stay ahead of the curve and learn Japanese, because this was the next big thing. So a bunch of them can say arigato, and a bunch of them can really do some awesome ordering for sushi at a restaurant. But apart from that, as far as helping them leverage into the business world, it didn't amount to anything. Because again, they locked themselves too far into a corner. So be very, very careful about that. Now, from the standpoint of this afternoon of talking about Islamic studies, I'm not really an Islamic studies professor. I actually teach Islamic and Middle East history, politics, and culture, which is a very broad subject. Islamic studies implies theology. And we certainly have experts here who can speak about what needs to be an expert on that. You can get a degree in Islamic studies. I mean, there are some very good universities that provide it, but it's not the same as a degree in theology. Okay? But then I think what's more important is to clarify this by saying that perhaps what we're really talking about is Muslim studies, or studies that are done by Muslims, or studies that are done from an Islamic perspective. Okay? Anything can technically be Islamic if you want to badge it properly. Or because you are Muslim, you will be seeing whatever subject you have through the lens of being Muslim. And irrespective of where on the spectrum you are, a secularist, an atheist, an Eid to eater, a 5 times a dayer, a hardcore person, it doesn't really matter. Your lens has already been crafted in a certain way that you are looking at it from a Muslim perspective. Some of the most ardent activists and advocates and defenders of Muslims today are actually atheists. A friend of mine in England is a very noted filmmaker, writer. In 1968, he led student protests against the Vietnam War in London. The Rolling Stones actually wrote the song Street Fighting Man about him. This is Tariq Ali. He admits he's an atheist. He was born to a Muslim family, a Pakistani family. But his defense of Muslims is as passionate as one can ever find. So it shows that don't necessarily judge a book by the cover. What we find then is not really the issue about whether it's Islamic or not. It has a lot to do with the deficiency in certain fields. Social sciences, anthropology, sociology, cultural studies, philosophy, political science, economics, in the history department, comparative literature, or in humanities, comparative history. Whether or not you realize this, people are writing about you, people are studying you, and have no clue about the cultural and the religious and the theological complexities about Muslims. Okay? So when you go to a bookstore and it cheers you to see certain book titles that are out there, like Did Muhammad Really Exist? And you know the ones on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble. It should really bother you. But how much can you scream when you're screaming from, forget about screaming from the bleachers, you're not even in the stadium. Because Muslims themselves have been very slow to come to these subjects. Why? Because these are the subjects that won't get you married. These are the subjects that won't get you any money. These are the subjects that are considered worthless. Well, let me tell you something. People are doing this work, and they're doing it very, very effectively. Now, slowly, somebody has been hit with a cattle prod in the Muslim community. You do find the occasional anthropologist, and you do find the occasional sociologist who's actually studying the community. Okay? It's not pretty, because like every other community, we're not completely pretty, but it's work that needs to be done. So if you're looking for a place to plug in, you see these fields are fertile ground for it to be done. And they are clamoring. I mean, Muslim is a hot topic these days in more ways than one, not just from the controversial standpoint, but because there's this deficiency. And people are starting to see that those who've already written about it, by and large, didn't really know what they were talking about, either because they were insidious or because they were incompetent. And people in academics are looking for truth, are looking for accuracy. So there's a place to plug in there. The other thing that you need to think about, whatever profession you want to go into, is mediocrity. There's a lot of people out there who are doctors, and let me give you full disclosure, my father's a doctor, and I didn't not become a doctor because I'm some kind of major rebel. Okay? I still talk to my dad every day, and I'm still in the will, from what he tells me. I know a lot of people who did the right thing, went to med school, became doctors, they made their money, they lived in the right zip code, and you've got to ask yourself, how many of them cure cancer? How many of them do anything other than rack up the bills? To me, that's mediocre. If you really want to do something, and this is where the vision and the passion really come in along with the intention, you can have the passion to do anything. I see a lot of passionless doctors, or ones whose only passion is to make money. Okay? I can tell you, especially with the roller coaster of economics, and with different paradigms of the way that healthcare and the industry is going, it is not a sure bet. I hear people sitting there thinking that they were going to make $1.5 million and they had to drop a couple zeros from their annual income. And now they're sitting thinking, oh my God, why did I do it? Well, wait a minute, I thought you wanted to be a doctor. I thought it was all about healing the sick. Well, then you realize that that was just for the med school at Interview. Okay. So be careful about that. There was this song by some of you don't know, it was called Wish You Were Here, if you want to know. By Pink Floyd, and the line in it was, did you exchange a walk-on part in the war for a lead role in the cage? You can be safe and think that you're at the top of the heap, but if you've never really explored yourself, if you've never explored the world, and if you've never challenged either yourself or the world, why do you bother signing up? You know, I know some of you have your license plates that say YOLO, you know, you only live once. Do you know what that means? I mean, have you ever really thought about it? This is the shot you get, man. Okay, so try not to be mediocre. You know, you want to be a garbage man, be a garbage man, or a garbage woman. Excel at it. I look at the garbage man when he comes by on Mondays, and I see how efficient they are, and I say, you know what, I can't do that. But I'm glad somebody's doing it. I'm glad somebody's really excellent. I don't see anybody leaving a trail of garbage down the road. Be involved, be connected. I think the fact that you're here today really shows that you're already in the game about that. Look ahead and stay ahead of the game. I mean, how many of you, be honest, how many of you really, really pay attention to the news? Okay? Pay attention to what's happening. And don't Google alert your minds to say, unless it has the word Muslim or Islam in it, that this is what matters. Everything matters. You know how everything was like in Austin Powers, I want to be an architect, an evil architect? I want to be a doctor, an evil doctor? Everything relates. You can always put the adjective in front. Be flexible, be able to adapt, be honest, especially with yourselves. If you don't want to be a profession that your parents want you to be, you've got to be honest. Not wanting to be, back then, being a lawyer was like being gay, in the sense that to tell my parents that I wanted to be something other than a doctor meant that I had to come out of the professional closet. Okay? It had to be done though. Okay? Things do change. Things do gain acceptance. Otherwise, you're really consigning yourself to a miserable life. Be prepared and realize with academics, or with whatever you want to do, that what your mission should be is to change the narrative. And if you're really lucky, to change the paradigm around you. And don't handicap yourself with artificial constraints. I know a lot of people think, you know what, I didn't go to the right school, I didn't go to Exeter, I didn't go to Cranbrook, I didn't go to Country Day. That doesn't matter. It may help which rung you start out from. You didn't go to the right school, you didn't go to an Ivy League school, you didn't go to a top 10 school. Okay? You didn't start off in a certain place. I went to a rural high school. I went to Michigan. Went to law school in Lansing, and then I finished up my graduate work at Wayne. It didn't stop me from lecturing around the world. It didn't stop me from getting to the White House, to get to the State Department, to get to the Pentagon. Later on, if you want, I'll show you a picture of me hitting the podium at the Pentagon with my shoe, but that's a different story. For those of you who remember Khrushchev, that was fun. None of that really matters if you've got the drive, if you've got the passion. People will see it, people will feed off it, people will be nourished by it. Now, more specifically about academics. I had my bachelor's degree in that highly bankable field of medieval literature, went to law school, and then got a master's in Near East Studies, PhD in history. You can do one of three things with academics, or you can do all three if you're really lucky, if you really want to. You can teach, okay? And the audience that you have when you teach is remarkable, okay? When we're talking about activism, there's nothing more active than getting in front of 20 to 200 people a semester per class and being challenged by them and challenging them and forming and shaping minds and perceptions. There's research. As I mentioned before, there's areas that are really lacking in research that you can plug into. And third, consultation. Consulting with the media. And if you're interested on, is it the 17th or the 18th, on Craig Foley on WDET, I'll be hosting for him because he's on vacation. So I can do a media gig too. Affecting policy and also consulting governments. I consult the UK government, I consult our government, and I consult the EU in Brussels on different issues concerning Muslim identity in the West. If you were to ask me the day I graduated high school, the day I graduated bachelor's degree, or my undergrad, the day I graduated law school, or even the day that I finished up my graduate work, if I would be having this ride, I would have not believed it for a second. Okay? It's what you make of it. That's really what's important. And if you're thinking, oh my God, how am I going to really go through all this school? I can tell you that my graduate work was a piece of cake. I was so motivated to do it. Nobody had to tell me to go through hundreds of pages of books a week. I read 7 books a week, and it's like, it's air. It's not a problem, okay? Build yourself a library in your Kindle or in your house. I've got a couple thousand books that I have in my own personal library and at home. It's just a wonderful thing. And it's not just Islam, or it's not just history. There's the history of the Beatles. There's all kinds of things that, we can go around on that too. Get your knowledge and realize then how you can plug into it. There is so much that you can do other than just a few paltry initials after your name to make everybody feel better about yourself. That's what I have.
Thank you, Professor. That was great.
We can take your questions later. Is that right?
Or I think we can take questions at the end. Okay. Next we have State Representative Diane Slavens. Here you go.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being invited. My colleague Rashida Tlaib was going to be here and unable to, and so she did ask me to come and talk a little bit about why I ran for office. And it's hard to follow up from the professor, is so good. So hopefully you'll enjoy my talk. One thing I do want to say is it is disappointing in so many forums I do attend how few people are engaged and involved, especially lately with what's going on. And I represent the state of Michigan, the 21st district. All of the legislation that's being rammed through. And I get phone calls from constituents all the time, people complaining. You hear it on the news, the radio, and yet you really have to be involved. And so thank you all so much for coming here today, because it takes a lot, but this is the first step. And I'll tell you, out of 110 state representatives, we have 26 women. 51% of our population is women, and we only have 26 women in the House and 4 women in the Senate with 38 senators. And so I really encourage women to step forward, because we are a loud voice and we need to be louder. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I represent Canton, Belleville, and Van Buren Township, Western Wayne County. I'm in my second term of office. I was able to win against a Republican in my community. It was held by Republicans for quite some time. Canton is changing. It's becoming much more diverse. It's a wonderful community, and it's becoming much more democratic. I just wish my Democratic friends would run for office, because we need that. Besides myself, I do have one of my neighbors, Dr. Taj, who's running for the 11th Congressional, and he is Muslim. And so we're hopeful that he's able to win the 11th Congressional seat. A few things. I became involved in politics at a very young age. My neighbor ran for city council. Another neighbor ran for school board. So you can start at any age becoming involved in politics. It's important. When I was 10, I was knocking doors and passing out literature. So certainly you can start early on and get involved. Certainly know who you're supporting, what they're all about, though. That's very important. And you can start early. You can start running for library council, or library board, school board, even student council. Those are ways to get yourself involved early. When I ran for office 4 years ago, I ran because I had huge concerns about our school district. Our school district was underfunded compared to the other neighboring districts, and so I decided to run for office. Prior to being elected, I worked at Henry Ford downtown. I have a medical background, and so I was a respiratory therapist, and I saw so many people coming into the emergency room who had no health care, and they were sick. They'd end up in an intensive care unit, on a ventilator, being dialyzed, and it's costly. Nobody should have to wait until they're so sick to get health care. And so I commend our president for getting the Health Care Act through. And I will fight hard here in Michigan to make sure that we push so that we are on board with the Health Exchange Act. That's something we need to have done by the end of this year. So the reasons I ran was to make sure that we had fair funding in education, that we were going to get health care, and then also bringing jobs to the state. We were losing a lot of manufacturing jobs in Michigan. Last term I was able to get a battery bill passed in Michigan, and so it brought companies like A123, Johnson Control, to build advanced batteries for like the Chevy Bolt. And so by bringing companies here to Michigan, it's going to help our economy. Unfortunately, people sat home in 2010 and didn't get out and vote. And we lost the House and we lost the governor. So now in Lansing, it's we have a Republican governor, Republican House, and a Republican Senate. We have no say in anything. A couple weeks ago, you probably heard a couple of my colleagues were stifled on the House floor when they got up to speak. They didn't like what they were saying, so they gabbled them down and wouldn't acknowledge them. I'm glad the press is finally showing that, because that has happened to me among many of my colleagues prior to that. And when we would go to the press, they didn't want to do anything in the news media. But this last sequencer for my colleagues was heard from the press, and so people are now paying a little more attention. And so, like I say, I encourage you at the state level and nationally, but because I'm a state representative, make sure that you're paying attention. College tuition is going up. When my husband and I went to college, the state paid 70% of college tuition, and then our families, our parents, were in charge of 30%. So you could get a job. I worked my way through college. Now, the state pays 30% of college tuition, and it's up to us to make up the 70%, which is out of reach for most people. They end up, I've talked to physicians who are graduated and have huge debts. They'll never be able to have their own practice until they're able to pay off their debt. And so that's, especially with you looking at college or in college now, those are very important issues to pay attention to. And the biggest thing is I encourage you to become involved in your community, know what your community wants, and be a voice. Rashida Tlaib is, I think, the first Muslim to be elected. And Dr. Taj, who's running for Congress, hopefully he'll get in too. So it's important that you too have a voice, not only in the state of Michigan, but here nationally. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Slavens. Next we have Judge Mark Slavens.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first of all, like my wife and like the professor, I'd like to thank all of you for even showing up. Unfortunately, this is not just a Muslim problem. This is generally a problem throughout the state of Michigan. I go to a lot of forums, and there just is not really great attendance. People, I don't know what they're doing. They're watching television all day long, I guess, because it is just amazing how few people get out to events like these, and these are crucial. So I'd really like to thank you. I'm a little uncomfortable up here today in that I didn't really know what I was going to talk about. I just drove my wife here, so and it's really bad for me because I feel like I'm sitting here with my father on both sides of me. My father is a minister, so we have a religious man down here, and then my father is also a professor at the University of Michigan, so I feel like I'm sitting between my dad today. I'm a Wayne County Circuit Court judge, and I'd like to build on what the professor talked about as far as if you've got your life all laid out for you. I had my life all laid out for me when I graduated from high school. I was going to be a University of Michigan history professor. That was it, and I was just going to do that, and I had everything all planned and everything. Well, then all of a sudden what came along was life. And life took me through, I did get into the University of Michigan. I went there for undergrad, but suddenly I got interested in economics and I was also taking a lot of history classes. But after I got done with 4 years, I said, what am I really going to do? And is this really what I want to be in life? Is this really, do I want to teach for the next 50 years of my life? And at that point in time, I made a decision to go to law school. Because I started to think about maybe I wanted to get into a career where I could help more people than the students in my class. Now, I'm not saying whether I was right or wrong on that, but I wanted to become much more of an activist. I was interested in politics at the time, and I thought, you know, as a professor, I would be with 30 or 40 students, or unfortunately at the University of Michigan, sometimes you have 600 students in your class. So, I went to law school then. Again, I thought, well, I'll be an attorney, and I got very interested in politics at that point in time, and I started running for office. And I always envisioned myself being a legislator. I ran originally from the seat that my wife has, and I ran as a Democrat in a Republican area. A lot of things that are going to happen to you in life, you don't have a lot of control over. So you have to be fluid. You have to be able to move back and forth between careers. And I think that is gonna change even more so with your generation, that things are gonna change more and more, and you're gonna have to recreate yourself. You aren't, the people, I remember when I got out of high school, people would say, I'm gonna get a job with Ford, GM, or Chrysler, and I'm gonna be there all the rest of my life, and they're gonna take care of me if I go to work every single day and do what they want. That is not working out for people anymore, either in both the blue-collar careers or the white-collar careers. You have got to get yourself a base to reestablish yourself. That's why it's so important to do what the professor's talking about. Get yourself a broad liberal arts degree in order to make it in life. Now, the other part of it is, I do think you have to educate yourself. I don't think you can make it in today's society at a high level of income if you don't have an education. And let me tell you the people that I'm seeing in my court. I'm in the Wayne County Circuit Court. I'm in the juvenile division. I have all these 14-year-olds that are in there that are reading at a first, second grade level or doing math at the third grade level. And I tell them, you are not going to make it. I mean, I wish I had different news for them. Their parents could get a job in the factory. They could have a nice middle-class lifestyle. Those days are gone. And I wish I had a different message for them, but I'm like, you have got to get yourself to school. I will ask them, how much time of the day are you spending watching television? I had one kid say, oh, not that much. I said, what's not that much? 16 hours a day he's spending watching television. I said, would you hire yourself? I always have them tell me what job they're going to do in life. And then I ask them, would you hire yourself with this criminal record and with this lack of education? And they say no. So we've got to change that whole mindset. The one wonderful thing I will tell you is I have 450 children on my docket, and I have one Muslim child on that docket. And that is because, to me, the three most important things that help develop a person are, first of all, belief in your God and following those tenets of whatever religion you're in. Secondly, your parents. And third, education. And unfortunately, a number of the children that I'm seeing are very devoid of all three of those factors. And in fact, a lot of the homes that I see, it's a single mother home. And one of the big things I do is I go out to the churches and temples and ask people to be mentors. And I'm recruiting a lot of mentors for these kids. But so anyway, going on, I thought I wanted to be a legislator, so I ran for office and I lost. And then I ran again for state senate and I lost, 51 to 49 in a very close election. Well, right after that, my life changed completely. I had my own law practice for 25 years. I had a very successful practice. And then I got a phone call from Governor Granholm, and she asked me if I'd like to be a Wayne County Circuit Judge. Well, I never really had thought about that. That was not my career path. My career path was I wanted to be a legislator. I wanted to pass laws and help people in that way. Well, I became a judge. I said, yes, I'll do it. And I became a judge, and I really do enjoy it. So you can see how my life went. I wanted to be a professor, then I want to be a lawyer, then I want to be a legislator, and I ended up being a judge. So don't get this mindset that I've got to be this one thing. And I'm going to get in trouble with your parents, but this is Oakland County, I'm in Wayne County, so I can tell you straight up on this. Do what you really want to do in life, whatever that is, because you're going to be spending 40 or 50 years of your life working. And if you have to get up every single day and say, I can't wait to be done at the end of the day, you are in the wrong career. I cannot tell you how many people, I'm 58 now, I feel 18, I really do, but I am 58. I can't tell you how many of my friends, the only thing they look forward to is retirement. I have never felt like that in my life. I've gone to work and hated it for that particular day because I had to do something that I didn't want to do, but not for more than a week or something. And I know that the professor loves his job because my dad did it. It is a great career also. And I know that your religious people, they love their jobs. Do something that you love. And if you can, do something, in my humble opinion, that helps other people too. And don't be motivated by money. Money's great, and you, on the other hand, you don't want to do something where you don't earn any income. You know, you got to be realistic. But try to do something that you really, every day you get up, it's not work. And if you do that, you are going to be very, very happy, and I think also very successful in life. I really, other than that, I'd be happy to answer questions. I don't think there's anything worse than hear somebody get up and just pontificate on and on and on. So, but thank you very much for
Okay, we can open the floor for questions now, if you guys would like.
Professor, what classes do you teach at Wayne State?
I teach 3 undergrad courses. One is early Islamic history, so basically from about 3500 BC, like hardcore Jahiliyyah into the fall of Spain. And then a second course which is on the rise and fall of the Ottoman Empire, which ends around at the end of World War I, the breakup of the Ottoman Empire. The third course is modern Middle East history, which is from roughly the beginning of the 20th century to whatever's in the newspapers the day before the final. And then I teach 2 graduate courses. One is the history and development of Islamic political thought, and the other one is Islam and the challenge of modernity. And that's where I let in undergraduate courses, the students, but those are primarily geared for master's and PhD students. And those are the ones where the lectures go straight vertical. And I used to teach at Michigan State. I was invited to teach at James Madison College. I taught Islam and world politics there. I've taught at UD Mercy and a couple other places around here too. Oh, and I should also mention this. I teach, in the fall, I teach a course on Muslim-Christian diversity at Rochester College, which is an evangelical college. And it's the first of its kind course. It's now going to be offered every fall semester. And the model is now being requested for other Christian colleges around the country. And one of the things that I discussed in Washington a couple months ago when I was there with the White House and the State Department is to see how we can get a course like that taught in countries where there's Muslim-Christian tension. Nigeria, Pakistan, Philippines, Indonesia, etc. So that's what it's about. And that course came about out of sheer serendipity. They bring their world religions class every semester to the Islamic Association of Greater Detroit and the IGD Mosque in Rochester Hills. So I happened to be there on a Friday. One of the board members said, "Can you give them a tour?" I said, "Sure." Developed a relationship with the professors that is now going on a decade. That happened in 9/11. They asked me if I would come in once a semester to lecture on Islam during their world religions class. We've become friends. We happen to be neighbors in Rochester Hills. And they said, "Listen, we thought about putting together this course. Are you in?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah." I always love a challenge like that. I always love an opportunity. I have a real tough time saying no. It's right next to Lifetime Fitness, so I can bust out some laps in the pool right after I'm done. It's the easiest and shortest commute that I have. It's only 3 miles from my house. And the fact that it got me into the White House and the State Department was something that we never thought about when we started this course in the beginning of last September. So it just shows you how things can really change.
Question for the floor. How many of the eligible voters are registered to vote as of today?
Well, that's...
Tomorrow is,
Tomorrow's the deadline, by the way.
tomorrow's the deadline, so make
Okay.
sure.
And what do you guys do to stimulate and invite or entice the other peers, brothers, sisters, and friends to do that? So, because this is a dilemma. Lots of eligible voters, they are not registered to vote out of laziness, and I do believe they are not really reading the consequences of what they are not doing. So can you just elaborate on that for 1 second on this and see how we can help them to do what they are supposed to do?
Well, I would just certainly encourage everybody, tomorrow is the deadline for the primary, and it is just imperative that you get out and register to vote and make sure you vote, and get to know who the candidates are. I know I'm in a very marginal seat, 50-50. I have a primary, which is very rare, but I'm encouraging everybody in my community to make sure they vote for me in the primary. So it's very important to get out, get registered tomorrow, and have your friends too. Make sure that your friends are registered to vote for the primary, and then naturally get them out to vote for the general election. We want the president reelected. We must have him reelected. If we have Romney as our president, he's going to do just what Governor Schneider has done, and it's just crushing the middle class and hurting our public schools.
Well, I guess what I'd say is if you don't vote, don't complain. I mean, it's the bottom line. If you're one of these people that sit around and complain and you don't vote, I don't have any respect for you. Because until you get up and you vote for a candidate that's going to make your position, you don't really have any say. And you're really giving up a right and an obligation by not voting. The other thing that's I'd like to encourage, especially the young ladies, but I'm going to encourage the young men too, because we always have a lot of people saying, the young ladies, my wife, it took a woman to win the seat. I ran twice and I couldn't win. A woman did it. And one of the dynamics that's taking place right now in politics is women vote for women. So if you run, you have a better chance because women do vote for women. And especially if you're going to run for a judgeship, the two best things that you can do, at least in Wayne County, to be elected a judge is be a woman. And secondly, it's an Irish name. And I'm Irish, but I didn't get an Irish name. And isn't that stupid that people are elected because of their last name? But if your name's Kavanaugh or Kelly, at least, I don't know if Oakland's like this or not, but at least Wayne County, you have a much better chance of being elected. And part of it, and most of that is because of an uninformed electorate. People have no idea who judges are. And yet you are much more likely to come in front of me than you are my wife. And yet you just go out and people just go out and go, oh yeah, I know that person's name, or that's a common name. So not only do you need to register, but you need to inform yourself on who you're voting for. And you really should not vote for someone that you don't know anything about just because of their name. And I'm probably cutting my own throat because I'm trying to get my name out there. But you really need to know who the people are that you vote for and what their positions are. And don't be afraid to challenge them. One of the easiest things to do as a politician is skirt around the answer. It drives me crazy that our journalists do not come back and say, wait a second, I asked you this question. I didn't ask you about what you're going to do about the economy. I asked you about what your position is on Muslims, for example. What's your position on Islam? And you're going to start telling me about the economy. Well, that's called a pivot. And that's what they're doing. And you have got to hold people accountable and say, what is your position on this? No, I didn't ask you that. And some people say, well, that's being rude. No, you're not being rude. You want an answer to your question.
Yeah, I think, how many of you are on Facebook? Wow. Twitter? Wow. You know, all it takes is a tweet. All it takes is one status update to tell your friends to vote, or to register to vote. That's all it takes. I mean, people will be like, oh, you know, you think you're like some kind of major activist? Yeah, you know, no apology. None whatsoever about it, you know? I mean, then there's this wonderful thing that you can defriend people who, you know, are trying to, you know, talk smack about you. The other thing is, and I really like the point that the judge made as far as, you know, getting into people's grills. I think that courage is something that really needs to be out there. You have to speak truth to power. If you want to be playing that lead role in a cage,